So over the summer, I had the opportunity to do a thing. I was responsibility free for a whole week. And so, only 4 years late to the party, I decided to make some sourdough bread. It was a blast. I fed that thing. I discarded that thing. I fed that thing. I discarded that thing. No actual bread was ever made in the making of this sourdough bread. Why was I doing it? Who knows? It's never going to happen again. But it rapidly dawned on me that I could easily be the all the gear, no idea guy in this venture. After all, I needed a Dutch oven, I needed a specially dedicated bowl, I needed a proving basket, I needed those funny little knives that they used to make those sweet, sweet little patterns. That's when I tapped out. I realised there was no way I was buying all of that gear, even on good after Christmas specials, to make a loaf of bread that I rarely buy anyway, that I might as well just buy. I'm Captain Sociology. Each week, we spend some time dissecting something that's contemporary, either in the news or in social media land. This week, we're looking at consumption, not the Victorian illness, but the way that we use consumer products and consumer activities to maximise our social positioning. So let's go. No, it's not just a bad anecdote, my sourdough misadventure. The reality is, sourdough is just one fantastic example of what sociologists really think of when they're talking about consumption. It's the endeavour, consuming objects is the endeavour to appear authentic to a particular way of life. It's something that, according to Zukin, we can only really perceive from the outside. So when we go visiting somewhere that's unusual, different, foreign, romantic, we perceive it to be people living, practicing, working their authentic lives. So when you go on that lovely overseas holiday and you think, these people really have it together. They have beautiful community. They know how to manage their climate. They know how to use local produce. I just want to be exactly like that. And then at precisely that moment, you start planning your overseas move. Yep, I'm totally going to uproot my life. I'm totally going to go live in a completely foreign country where I actually don't know anything about how anything works, because it is actually quite different to what I know. What we're trying to consume is authenticity. And it might look appealing on the outside. We might be seeing something that's very important that might be missing from our lives. But what we plan on doing as we look at it from the outside is going to participate in an intimate relationship with some sort of object. And Zukin says that participation, that intimate relationship, ultimately reduces the authenticity. So we have to go looking for it somewhere else. And that's how we consume our way through life. It happens a lot. That new house that you need, that new car that you need, that new piece of furniture, carpets, paints that you need on the wall. It's how marketing works. Like, I hate to burst the bubble if you don't know this already, but it is how marketing works. Marketers work really hard at selling authenticity, this idea that somewhere just beyond your reach, people are living their best life now in a much more realistic, down-to-earth kind of way. And typically, it's just not true. Because when you get down to the coalface, most people are faced with similar kinds of problems. Zukin notes that also, as we move into these authentic spaces, we do something absolutely dreadful. We take our authentic space into their authentic space, and we ruin it. Not necessarily saying that it was good to start with, because we've just said, Zukin said, the problem is that we're observing it from the outside without that intimate knowledge of how good or bad something really is, how it really works. But worse than just not knowing is that we we take our need for comfort, our need for the familiar, our need for the patterns that we already recognize to maximize our social positioning, and we take that into this unfamiliar space. So we might move to a neighbourhood where we really like how people live. It seems so down to earth, much simpler kind of life. You'll have heard people say things like this before. And then when you arrive there, you discover they don't have a grocer or a convenience store. Maybe they don't have a bus timetable that really suits your needs. Now you need a car. You take your busyness of your city life into this more relaxed and rural space. And we see it a lot with outer suburban suburbs. People enjoy the quiet, the relaxedness. They go live there. And then it gets super busy. I live in one of those suburbs. It's grown considerably in the last 20 years, and it's set to just about double in size in the next 10 years. But people move here for the quiet, for the relaxed lifestyle, for that feeling of being in the country. And it just isn't going to last. And yet that's still how houses are being sold here now. So here's the thing. We take our familiar with us. Zukin describes this as consumptive authenticity. We need to jump into what we think is super authentic. That farmer's market, that farm to freezer meat producer. But in our drive and marketing, so much to answer for here, in our drive to make these things authentic rather than just living the life as it is, things get given a backstory. I know the man who produces the beef that I eat. I know the woman who raises the chickens with the eggs that I cook with. And I mean, it's possible. It might be your neighbour. You might know them. But the problem is that typically as these places become increasingly populated, they can't serve the needs of the people that are moving there. And so we start having to fill them with those things, the convenience and the supermarkets, the busier roads, the processes that make things easier where we already are. And then to reinfuse it with this authenticity that we moved for, we have to give it these backstories. And we see it in marketing a lot. And it's kind of, if it wasn't so sad, it'd be quite hilarious. The story about Mavis the cow on the back of your milk carton. Mavis the cow doesn't exist. But in order to feel connected with the authentic lifestyle of the farmer that we moved to be near, especially when we see people moving from larger, more populous states and cities to smaller, less populous states and cities for these sea and tree changes, they think they're moving to some kind of rural paradise, and it just isn't what it is. It's a normal life for normal people who have normal concerns. The other problem, of course, that Zukin points out is that we get, this process is essentially a gentrification. People move someplace because it seems like this really idealistic, idealized, people living more simply. And then we bring all that beautiful convenience in with us eventually. Or maybe more accurately, corporations capitalise on our need for convenience and the increasing population in certain areas that previously didn't have a residential population of any consideration. And bringing those things in kind of gentrifies suburbs. And we see it, this was first studied in inner city suburbs where people would move into, your loft that used to be some kind of warehouse or production centre and had been abandoned, and then somebody moved into, did up, turned into a cute little living space, and then we see people wanting to replicate that, right? So in that particular context especially, Zukin observes gentrification as one of the significant things that goes on. But what happens is that the people who move in and gentrify these places do exactly what it sounds like, and they make them upper middle class, at least, moving them away from the people who did live there, who had these authentic lifestyles. What happens then? The people who do have the authentic lifestyles get moved into little corners, pockets, out into different, further, more distant suburbs. It increases inequality, and we're going to come back and visit the inequality that is met out by consumption later in the week. So it increases inequality, but it also, I don't know if you've seen what's going on here. We've actually completely removed the people that made this an authentic space that people are wanting to move into. We've just turned it into another milk carton suburb, just with some cute facades. Okay. Rousseau, he had this theory that actually individuals who are authentic are more authentic when they live closer to nature, or their perception of nature. What do you notice when we talk about Zucker's idea of authenticity? I mean, it's not really closer to nature, is it? But I think we see something there too. It's the romanticization, the noble savage myth that actually those who live closer to nature have it better off. And again, it's that same idea that Zukin was getting at. It's that from the outside, things look and appear and seem magnificent and authentic and back to basics once you get in there. Well, people who live closer to nature typically struggle with basic stuff, don't they? Do you want to get your sewage pumped out manually every couple of years? Do you want to get surprised when your septic tank backs up? Do you actually just want to go into the bush to do your thing? No, you don't. And you don't want to have to decide between washing your hands and having a glass of water either, because, you know, you're done collecting water today. I mean, that's very basic, but that is in reality what happens. Do you want to have to choose between being warm and getting food? No, you do not. You want to be able to do both, because they're kind of secularly dependent on each other. From this, the Zukin idea, we can see that Siegel is probably quite right. Siegel says that rich wealth is typically associated with hypocrisy. And when you think about that inner city suburb that was, run down and gentrified by your middle and upper middle class opportunists who moved there for authenticity and then ran the authenticity out of the place by consuming it, by devouring it even. Siegel's right. That wealth does exactly the opposite of what it thinks it's doing in this scenario. I have one more point to make, and that relates to Goffman. So you'll know Goffman. He's got that theory of self we call the performance masks. And he talks about how we take on the different masks in different places according to different actions that we wish to take. So, if you want to be a good student, you'll mimic other good students, etc. Well, one of the tenets of his theory is that actually until you can give off, that is, speak effectively as a member of a group, you're still performing. And I think one of the things we notice with people who consume authenticity is they very rarely give off. Yeah, they rarely start speaking and living like farmers. They rarely start speaking and living like inner city suburbanites. They don't. You don't hear a whole lot of gang slang or, the trials of today coming out of their mouths, partly because they have wealth that enables them to not have to engage with the trials of today, and partly because they actually never become that thing that they're consuming for its authenticity. They never become a real inner city dweller. When things get really tough and when life changes happen, such as having kids or retiring, they move. They literally retire, move to a more appropriate dwelling. And so they don't ever have the opportunity. Furthermore, I think thinking about our concepts of social and cultural capital, while they continue to mix with those more suburban peers of theirs, they're not going to drop their linguistic pattern to match that of those around them, because that would actually minimise the opportunities and life chances that they're trying to maximize. It would do the opposite to what they're trying to do. Because, of course, we are all trying to thrive, not just survive. And so nobody wants to minimize their opportunities by taking up linguistic patterns that don't do that for them. We're trying to maximize our social cultural capital, not minimize it. And so in that way, again, saying that they want to live more authentically, these people actually completely fail. I've been Captain Sociology as we continue on our look at the sociology of consumption, which, despite the rapid overview that we're giving it this week, is quite a big and interesting area of study. We are going to be having a look next. When we next meet, we're going to be looking at continued look at this consumption of authenticity and consumption as a way to maximize social positioning. After that, we're going to have a look at the inequality that is met out by consumption behaviour. And then finally, we're also going to have a look at environmental issues around consumption. It's a kind of different take to the typical sociological look at consumption. But I think in the 21st century, it's important that we bring these two ideas together a little bit. So that's what we'll be doing for the rest of the week.